Hi, George Durkee again with video 2 of creating a web app from the web map you created in the first exercise. And in this one, I'm changing the emphasis a little bit for folks in the general public and emergency services community who might want to follow along. And so I'm calling this public information maps for emergency incidents using ArcGIS Online. And that's kind of the reason for this whole exercise in the first place is to do a map of an incident showing both the location of the incident, so in this case the Bryceburg Fire and the fire perimeter, and other needed information like evacuation zones, road closures, things like that. And one of the reasons our emergency services GIS group came up with this approach is there seemed to be a need for graphically showing the locations of evacuations. So here, for instance, is kind of a typical evacuation notice from Nixle, uh, the service that sends out the notices, and this is for the Bryceburg. It's expired, but in any event, what they do is they send you a text uh, with the roads that are uh, that are the boundary for where the evacuations are. And that's great if you live in the area and know where you are, but especially up here in the foothill communities, we get a lot of visitors, a lot of B&Bs and hotels and so on and so forth, and people don't necessarily know where they are within that bunch of roads. And so it seemed to us about 2 years ago that this wouldn't be too hard to map. Of course, the important thing is when you do this, you should be working closely with the sheriff's department, who are the ones who determine where the evacuations are going to be. And of course, they do that in cooperation with CalFire or Forest Service or whoever the fire agency responsible is. But when we first started putting these out, we weren't getting a lot of buy-in from the sheriffs. So we just publish them on our own with a disclaimer saying, this is not official, and would give a link to the sheriff's Facebook page or Nixle so that people could get the latest information. But at least it showed them a map location of the incident and the evacuation zones and road closures. And ArcGIS Online has a search box which allows you to enter in your address and find out if you're within that zone. So in the second video, we're going to continue with adding a few more feature classes to our web map from the first video. And we're going to create an evacuation zone polygon feature class. And then we're going to convert fire perimeter and evacuation zone. So those are the two feature classes we actually created. And we're going to put them in view mode. And this is kind of a cool feature of ArcGIS Online because when you create your web map, that's the one you're going to want to use internally um, to be able to edit and update the features, the perimeter, and things like that. But when you push something out to the public, ultimately as a web app, you don't want editing to be enabled on that one. So AGOL has a feature where you create your editable feature class, and then you make it a view layer where you disable editing. And so the one feature class updates the other automatically. So you update your internal web map web page, and it automatically is reflected in the view file, and you create a new public non-editable web page. And from that one, you create a web app. And there's also another type you can create, which we're not going to do, but the template exists to create one within Arc Online, and you create a tabbed web page, which will include not only your web app, but other relevant information. So for instance, the one we did for Tuolumne County has tabs for a number of web pages that might be helpful. So we have an information page, which has the legend and an explanation of what folks will see there and what's available. Your fire perimeter and evacuation zones tab for that, which is what we're creating now. A link to the web page from CalFire on how to prepare for an evacuation using their Ready, Set, Go model, and the specific guidelines for Tuolumne County, and then a list of additional resources. So the sheriff's Facebook page and the Tuolumne County Alert Center and InsaWeb, which is the central fire information web page from the interagency fire service. So let's go back to our Bryceburg Fire web map, and here in red, the smaller polygons are the ones we created and drew in the first video. The road closures are still in effect. This is live off their server. And here's the outline once the fire started getting published to the Interagency Fire Center GIS FTP site. And so those are automatically being taken off of that and then published. And so here's the total size of the fire with their own label. Notice, just for information, that it burned up to the edge of last year's Ferguson fire, which makes sense. There's probably an excellent line here, but also, of course, it all burned here, so there's no significant fuel. And then it was stopped along the road, and along the west side here, they were able to get containment. So it's still going, but it's I think it's considered contained by now. And all the evacuation orders have been lifted, so it no longer shows the evacuation zones that Mariposa GIS had created. But what we're going to do is create our own evacuation zone feature class, and we'll do it the same way that we did for the Bryceburg Fire data, which was the polygon of the fire perimeter. So you just go to Create and Feature Layer and Build a Layer. And we're just going to choose Polygon for this. Create. Just cycle through. And we'll focus in on the area here, although that's not absolutely necessary, but it does make it a little easier. And that's Yosemite Valley there, so here's Bryceburg down here at the bottom of the grade. And we'll call it Evacuation Zones, Bryceburg, Mariposa. And Evacuation Zones, let's just keep it simple. And so the two types are mandatory and advisory. Some agencies have a third type, but most just use two. One, obviously mandatory, get out now, and they may vary the word advisory, but it's more a heads up. So that also complies with the CalFire's Ready, Set, Go approach. And done. And just for your information, I paused it there. It takes maybe 20 or 30 seconds to do that. So now your feature class has been created. It's a polygon layer. And so let's go to Data and Fields, and we want to add a field, which we're going to call Evac Zone. And it's got to be one word there, and then Evacuation Zone. It'll be a string, which is text. And let's keep it to 50 characters. We don't want a default value, and add new field. And next we're going to define two different zones, and we'll then create a symbol, different color for each. And this is a pretty good technique to know. So just click on your evacuation zone, and here you have the ability to create a list. So for the first one, we'll call it mandatory evacuation, and the code will just be mandatory. And then we add a second one for advisory, and then same. And we'll just save those two. And if you create a list for anything else, you can enter as many as you want. And so what happens there is that when you choose that feature class and that field, you get a drop down giving you all those choices. So next we'll create a different symbol for each of those two, advisory and mandatory. And so you go to visualization. And here's your symbol here. Gives you a default, the blue. So you go to change style. And for the attribute to show, we want evacuation zone. And then it realizes, okay, there's two types there, and it gives you what they are going to set up as a default, but we're going to want something different. So we go to type and unique symbol, and we'll do first the change symbol of advisory, because we want that actually to be yellow or orange. Let's choose, yeah, no, that's too. You'll probably fool around with symbology a little bit, but let's go with sort of an orange, sort of a caution type symbol. And then the outline, let's go with a darker outline. Line width, and again, you can spend a long time fooling around with this stuff, but we'll go with that, and then OK. And for mandatory, you're going to probably want red as fill. You got to obviously pay attention to, and we'll keep the outline as red as well. And notice it's got a high transparency. We're going to want to continue with that. So here's the transparency here. So we're actually for both of them. So we're going to want to bump that up, allowing people to see through the symbol onto the terrain, street names, and so on underneath. In the visible range, you can do all this later, but we're here. Let's do it now. Let's put it at the county level, and that means if you're zoomed out beyond the county level, it won't show these polygons. And the same we'll do with labels later, and then just OK, and done. And then obviously you're going to want to save your layer. And let's go to settings and make sure we're sharing that right. Or, well, I'm sorry, editing's enabled, so you're just checking on that, because we're going to want to be able to edit. And let's just, for grins, prevent it from being accidentally deleted. Now back to our content within the Bryceburg folder. And we've got two feature classes that we created. So now we're going to want to save those both as non-editable view layers. Oops. So you click on the layer. And now we create a view layer. And here, it'll fill in a default, but you put in public or non-editable, whichever. And under summary, public view, and then OK. And let's see how it's shared. We'll share this to Columbia College GIS, though in practice, because this is the public layer, you'd want to share it to everyone, but let's just keep this internal to the college. And then OK. And now let's go back and do that again. And we'll do that with, notice up here it says hosted view. So it tells you it's a view layer, and we've said that it's public, so nothing like redundancy. So now we'll do the same thing to the Bryceburg Fire data. Now this is the perimeter, and as I mentioned, usually by the third day of an incident, they're publishing the perimeter. So we don't really need this anymore, but we'll just go through and do it anyway. And it could be that there are days that the perimeter doesn't get published for one reason or another. Okay, so public, public. Okay, and now, okay. And once again, let's go see how this is shared. And we would have done everyone again, but we'll keep this within the college for the moment. And that's what you'd want to do at the beginning anyway, to make sure you get everything working right. And then when you're ready to release it, just go in and do the map for the public. And if there are layers in the map that are only to Columbia College, say, it'll remind you. And then the second trick there, which I highly recommend, is when you've created your public map, do a web, a private web browser and test it there. Because right now we're signed into our Columbia account, and no matter what you do, you'll be able to see your map because you're signed in to the layers you have permissions for. But it could well be that when you publish it to everyone, you forgot to change the permission on a layer. So when you do a private browser, it'll challenge you for a login if one of the layers is not set to public. So be sure to do that before you after you release to the public and before you're sure everything's good. Okay, so now it's back to our original map, and just for grins, let's save it. And now we're going to add the evacuation zone. So search for layers under My Content. So there's public, public, and we're going to add the evacuation zone Mariposa. Sure that's right, I think it is. And go back. And so let's just draw in a couple of test evacuation zones here. And we'll go to Edit. And it shows you the layers that are available to be edited. So here's our fire data, but we want to draw in advisory. So click on the advisory symbol. And then when you move it over to the map, a little pop-up comes up, and let's just you click once to start. And so we're just drawing in a random area here, bring it up along the road, double click to end it. And close that. And now let's do mandatory. Same thing. You want it to border your other area if that's what's indicated by the Sheriff's Department. We're just quickly doing something here. There you go. Now it might be that after drawing it, you might want to delete it because you made a mistake, or even change it. So then you, well, still in edit mode, you can click inside uh, your drawing, and then you can delete, but you can also move the points here. So you can do that if the area expands, or you might just want to delete it and start over again. But anyway, you can edit it. So now, let's click outside there to, there we go. And now let's go back to our table of contents here. And for those of you in Fire, uh, CalFire actually has a template both for fire incident symbols, and it's got pretty much everything in there. It's got command post and perimeter, and it's got fields such that you can put in date and road, so on and so forth. And then we've also got a road closure layer, again symbolized better than what we created here, but it's got the road closure sign there. Well, that's Mariposas, so that is the one. And the same with the evacuation zones. We have a template for that. So for those of you in emergency services, write me at g1durkee@gmail.com, and I can get you those. I think they're on the CalFire site as well. So you may also want to label these. We'll just do a very simple layer. So you click on those three little dots there, go to Create Label, and right now it's set to Creator, but you want Evacuation Zone, and we'll also do a halo, which adds whatever color you want. Right now it's set for white, but when you have several color backgrounds, it's useful to do a halo for contrast. And again, we'll set the visible range down to, well, we had it on county. Let's put it at county. Let's make it a little bit bigger there, larger, and it's already bold, and then OK. You can also, I'm not going to do it in this session, maybe in the next one, but you can create a custom label, although it's not letting me. Oh yeah, new expression. You can create your own label expression using the arcade expression language, and I may do one in the next and last video of this set, but it complicates your life a little bit, so we might just keep it simple here. But for instance, you can add the word advisory, or evacuation : advisory, or if we had just had mandatory here, you could have added the word evacuation in an expression. And you could also add, say, the date as to when it's effective. And so if you look over here, I did an expression for Ferguson Fire. I added the word fire and then also the date of the incident. So you can fool around with that stuff. Let's save. And notice that because I changed the sharing, I think I didn't save this map to share it with Columbia, so it's telling me that. And so let's update the sharing so it's all the same. And just for grins, let's go to share. And it's Columbia College. And notice also you get a short link to the map. Now, a number of you in the class have been sending me the URL up in the top bar here as a link to the map, and that works, but it's better to use this link here, the short link, which we get from the share tool here. And then just click OK. And also, incidentally, I didn't do it here, but it's often a good practice to make the label the same color as the symbol. So you'd want red and yellow. That's a little harder to do for each, but it's possible. And that way people can instantly see that the label goes with the symbol color that you've created for it. Okay, now we'll do one more thing here. So this is your internal uh, editable map, and that's what you'll be working with in, say, a command post. So we're going to save as, and we're going to change it to public, because this will be the non-editable fire map, and we're going to save the map. Okay, so notice that this now says public, so this will be our public map. So let's get rid of our fire data, and we're going to put in the view layers that won't be editable. And notice Mariposa's road closure layer clearly identifies them as public. So now we go back and we add the public layers we just created. So there's public there, and there's the evacuation zones public, and that's all we need. Go back to details, save that. And it doesn't carry the, the labels, so you'd go back in and rebuild the labels in your perimeter and in your evacuation zones. So let's call this video right here, and we've created our public web map. So next we'll take that, and let's go to content here. And remember that you'll often need to go back and forth to content. So you can go to home and right click under content and then open it in a new tab. So you can always have a content tab open. And so here's all of our layers associated with the Bryceburg Fire. And it could be that, I think I mentioned this in the first video, that you want all your data to be in one folder, because this can get out of hand. But I think this will be all we're going to have, this in the web app. Okay, thanks for watching this section, and I'll do a video 3 where we'll actually create the web app for the public to view. And one more thing, this is emphasizing fire, but you can use this for any emergency incident, flood, power outages. For instance, we just had one of those here in Tuolumne County, hurricanes where you can show the track of the hurricane. So it's good for all manner of emergency incidents. And again, it's a way of getting the public to graphically see, on a map where they are in relation to the emergency, and to keep them informed of evacuation orders and advisories, and location of road closed, and all that sort of thing. Okay, thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.